we've got a bunch of questions that are sort of all in the theme of how do I summer? How do I have my summer? I want to have my summer. What do I do? And these questions include, what about pickup basketball and football games? What about my kids' little league starting? My playgrounds are still closed, but the ball courts are open. Do kids need to wear masks outside? Summer stuff. So let's see, who wants to tackle that first?
Well, I'll tackle it first with a little guideline, little rule of thumb that Dear Pandemic and our partner Impact released this week called Stay Smart. And SMART is an acronym. We've published it on the Facebook page. We'll probably publish it again. Oh, but it doesn't show up against the purple background. So SMART. So S is space. So we still want to keep distance as much as possible. M is masked. A is air, so outside or well-ventilated area. R is restrict, and that's the tough one. That's keeping your social group to a pretty stable, small bubble of those people you sort of know and share risk preferences with. And T is time, keeping it short. So space, mask, air, restrict, time, stay smart.
I'm gonna post it in the comments on this video right now.
Yeah. Okay. So any event or socializing activity that you want to think about this summer, just keep that get smart thing, stay smart in the back of your mind. And all of this is on a spectrum, right? There are not smart activities and non-smart activities. All of those are sort of choices along a spectrum. And making sort of the best choice that you can over and over again is going to make for a safer, happier summer.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, that Alison should start by introducing the SMART idea. That we can also remember that like stacking those things is also beneficial, right? So in the areas that we're able to do multiple of those things, that also reduces risk to a greater extent than maybe any, one of them alone. Specific activities, are we gonna talk about that?
Great. Well, yeah, I'm not sure. The sports are tough, but okay. I just wanted to mention somebody I knew gave an example of a new play date where people the kids brought their own blow up pools that were safely distanced, but like we're in the same yard, and they just had a blast, being in the same vicinity. So I think kids are showing us that even if they're in the same vicinity outside but distance, they can still have a ton of fun. So I think kids might be better at that flexibility than we imagine they are.
And I think for my kids, because I was very strict for very long, they're just glad to even see people outside at this point. And they know that if they don't stay reined in, I'm going to pull them back inside. But in terms of sports, I think, Malia, maybe something worth addressing is this issue of like surface contamination and like the duration of time and the closeness. So some sports themselves, like basketball and football, to me seem like close contact sports. Even something like soccer is a close contact sport. Something like playing catch from a 20-foot distance, if you are taking breaks to use hand sanitizer, is to me on the safer end of that spectrum of doing sports. Keeping consistent groups of kids together. I want to give a shout out to my local Little League that against all odds and neighboring communities decided to take an approach of doing small group sort of skills-based activity with small groups of less than 10 kids instead of playing games and interleague games. And they took to heart that advice that, that CDC has put out, I think, where on the range of risk of sports activities, those that involve intercity play and the most co-mingling of teams are going to be on the higher end of that risk spectrum. And those that involve small, all the way down to those involving small groups and sort of taking measures like wearing masks, keeping social distancing, and using hand washing or hand sanitizer to reduce sort of any transmission through fomites are going to be at the lower risk spectrum of that, option. And so thank you, Shore Little League.
Yeah, and that gets back to this idea we've talked about a couple times of the complexity of our germosphere, and that's what the R in SMART is restrict, right? It's much higher risk to have your kid going to little league practice over and over with the same 10 kids. That's relatively low risk as compared to having let's say a big swim meet where you've got kids across several different pools and all of their parents together in close proximity to one another, right? They're both going to be outdoors. They're both going to be involving a lot of respiratory droplets because people are being physically active, but they are probably different risks just because of how wide that network goes.
Also imagine the difference in having to notify or contact trace those groups in the case someone does test positive, like a parent from that group does test positive. If it's just the 10 kids in your baseball team that is just doing skills this summer versus, by the way, at the swim meet where there were people from 8 different towns.
Shouting in the stands, yeah.
Yeah. So it really simplifies contact tracing in the event of a case.
Yeah.
And I think, this particular, group 2 has written up guidelines. Everyone had to read them. And I'm probably a little biased because my nurse husband is coaching. So I know, and he knows that if he doesn't follow these guidelines, he'll hear it from me. And he's very diligent. So I have some peace of mind there. But, and there are systems in place for like you said, notifying if someone becomes ill or what steps have to be taken and how we have to take a 2-week break and all quarantine. And these expectations are very explicit, and that is going to help a lot in that process.
Yes, that's once again that communication piece where everybody's on the same page.